started.
So I'm going to minimize you, PJ. Is that okay? I'm going to minimize everyone. For those who just joined, thank you again for the opportunity for having me here today with you. I'm so sorry I sound like this. I have walking pneumonia. Perfect timing, right? For HR professionals as we all run to the finish line for every compliance element ever. I promise you I don't sound like this on a daily basis. I see some of my ex-colleagues on this phone, so they know for sure. So my apologies if my voice is coarse, but I'm so excited to have this conversation and I would not miss it for the world. My name is Jyoti, Jyoti Marwa. I am the CEO and founder of Moonshot HR Consulting. And I can share for those who also own their consulting business, this took a lot of sweat, tears, and guts to open up my own consulting company earlier this year. So I'm very, very excited. This is one of my few presentations I've done this year. I also work full time. I'm a mom of two. I have a boy and a girl. My girl just turned 10 yesterday, so it was her birthday. This is year 18 in HR, so I'm putting my age on it, but that's okay. If you know me, you know that I love chocolate. I start my day with chocolate and my day with chocolate, and I am an avid Bollywood dancer. I'm also an extroverted introvert. So I keep my social circle small, but when you do see me in smaller settings, I am very extroverted. All right. Um, because each of us are going through open enrollment season, performance evaluation season, the election that just happened last week, right? Let's just pause and reflect. And every other compensation discussion that we're about to have with our team members, our managers, I'd like to understand if you could chat, why do you think folks fear conflict? I'm going to see some responses coming in. It's uncomfortable. It causes more work. It's uncomfortable to be at odds with others. Fear of not being liked, fear of embarrassment and uncomfortable. Absolutely. I think people are afraid of saying the wrong thing or being disliked. Anxiety, whew, we all feel that. I think there is a negative reflection on their management style or on the department as a whole. Absolutely. Opposing viewpoints. It's uncomfortable and you have to decide whether to be real or be nice, right? Especially given our profession. All right. I'm going to minimize you again. Thank you so much for contributing to that. Um, PJ, would you be able to put a polling question out?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So the polling question is on a scale of 1 to 5. How high are your emotions before entering a difficult conversation? You know what? I'm going to answer this too. Now, five's the highest. I see a lot of fours, split between 3 and 5. Okay. About half the attendees here feel that their emotions are on the higher end.
All right, I ended the poll and went ahead and shared the results and stopped sharing.
Thanks, PJ. So like I said, about half of you folks feel that entering a difficult conversation, your emotions are pretty high, right? And that's normal based on what we've seen, based on our lived experiences. One of the first things that came to my mind when I was setting up this presentation is Dale Carnegie, and I'm an avid fan of Dale Carnegie and sending a lot of folks to Dale Carnegie courses and so forth. So this quote really stood out. When dealing with people, remember you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but creatures of emotion. So one of the first things I thought of is humans are a complicated species, right? And many of us have witnessed in our HR careers times where our emotional regulation in high conflict situations can lead to dissent and psychological wounding. The way we think and feel matters, absolutely, and we make sure our staff know that. But often our inability to distance ourselves, and not just HR, I'm talking human in general, distance ourselves from emotions hinders our ability to see reason on why that conflict is actually taking place. Many of us have avoided conflict situations, which actually makes matters worse when you're at the time of engagement, right? I know personally, I've had to resort to sticky notes if I am dealing with a high conflict situation. I just don't want to talk to the person. This was earlier on in the career, and pass sticky notes to, the workstation next to me. Or I've been emotionally scarred because of the lived experience I've had. So whether it's adopting ways to avoid conflict situations or thinking of experiences that cause us anxiety, uncomfort about what is that person going to think about me? What if I have a different viewpoint? Is that mistake shaming? There are so many thoughts that come to our mind. Daily, both in our personal and professional lives, we deal with difficult conversations. Now, as a mother of two, I remember fighting with my toddler for bath time, and ensuring that they got to bed on time. And that's a high stakes conversation for those of you who have or been in that situation before. Or convincing my boss that I want a promotion, telling them that here's my justification, and then being told no. So time and time again, we have a choice to make, right? We can either bow down to our toddler and say, hey, go ahead, take another hour. You're going to win this argument. You don't have to take a bath. We'll talk about this again in an hour, and we run away. Or for work, we make a decision, we move on from that employer, and that's the end of that case. What's really important here is that we figure out a way to avoid us from landing in an emotional minefield when managing conflict. And the first way to do that is to actually understand why that conflict takes place. So as many of you know, there are different ways to classify conflict: interpersonal, intrapersonal, intergroup, and intragroup. Understanding the dynamics of conflict positions you better to have informed strategies to proactively manage the situation. Now, anyone notice a theme here? Each of these conflict situations lead to one thing: high-stake emotions. When we let our emotions lead over reason, when we begin to create assumptions before leading with curiosity, when we exhibit power, think hierarchy, status, over practicality, that's when we begin to lose meaningful connection with the opposing party. And look, I get it. There will be situations where no matter how skilled the facilitator is, the actual conversation might not end in the benefit of the employer and the employee. Those situations will just not improve. There will be folks that are so emotionally troubled that a professional intervention will not work. But that's not always the case, right? We want to exhibit optimism here. That's not always the case. And I'm here to help guide you through a framework that I've been using for years that will help you navigate through those difficult conversations where you can actually embrace conflict to form meaningful connection. Each participant will walk away with talking points that I'll send after our meeting today, that you can use, you can edit, you can, it's fluid, but it's something that you would use as a resource, and I'm proud to share that with you today. So back to sample the conflict situations. Think of the situations you've been with, both personally and professionally, probably day to day for the folks on this call. They're peer-to-peer. They're boss to direct report. They're direct report to boss, right? Managing up and across. Or all of us, we've been external mediators, right? And we know that's not easy in our jobs daily. But the framework for a conversation narrative is very important. You want to start with intent and you want to set boundaries, right? You want to ensure you open the conversation with, I'm about to give you some difficult feedback on a recent situation. Fingers crossed, all of us have timely conversations with our direct reports or our managers. And my hope is that you are willing and ready to have that conversation. Let's pause for a second. What I just did is I let my conversation partner know that I'm getting ready to give them feedback they may not be in favor for or of. This conversation may not be easy, but I want to open their mindset, help them deregulate some of those emotions that they probably already knew coming into that conversation. The next thing you want to do is set boundaries for the conversation. You want to spell out what the boundaries are that are important to you. This conversation will be professional. We're going to keep a neutral tone. We're going to be objective. There is no yelling happening here. This is going to remain confidential to the degree possible. Those boundaries basically are ground rules for acceptable behavior. And that's critical to set the stage for a good conversation to take place. You also want to discuss what's at stake, meaning you want to spell out the problem. From the very beginning, what is the problem you are trying to solve? In Simon Sinek's words, one of my favorites, start with the why, right? Tell them why we're having this conversation today and what hopefully the goal is. When you're setting that up from the beginning, you're helping someone understand how that conversation narrative is going to go. You're also going to help them understand what the gap is between your version of the story and theirs. You're going to help them by agreeing to the issue on hand, right? You all have a shared pool of meaning. You all are there for a purpose to support your team members, to support their direct reports, to support the organization's mission and vision. And what you're doing here is you're inviting them into the conversation to be collaborative thought partners. Remember, it's important to gauge that both you and them have a common shared pool of meaning. And that's really helped in my experience. Next, you want to listen. And I mean actively listen. We all have a deep desire to be heard from our spouse, from our children, from our manager. Someone just has to listen to us. That's all we want. But listening is one of the most powerful skills you can bring to a difficult conversation. Use your words to convey that that's exactly what you're going to do. Listen with an intent to understand. I know I can't be the first person to tell you that. Again, listen with the intent to understand their perspective. When you listen, you are actively paying attention to the other side. And your emotions are not at the forefront. What that does is, just as you want to be heard, it helps you put your emotions to the side and listen to what your conversation partner is saying. Just like you want to be heard, so do they. Next, and if you work with me, I'm sure folks here have, you know it's very, very important that I continue saying as a coach, play back what you heard. What does that do? It provides alignment. You're able to understand with your conversation partner what you just said to them. Did they actually hear it? Are you aligned on next steps? And for the sake of coaching in the moment, I would always say, write that in a summary. Not only just say it in the conversation, but ensure you play that back in a summary to them. Written communication is so critical, as all of us know, for documentation purposes. Create a development plan. What that does, it is allows your conversation partner to understand what is next. What are they going to take ownership of? What is the employer, their manager, asking of them? And how does that interconnect to their performance? right? So again, the framework for a conversation narrative that has really helped me in my career is starting with the intent and setting boundaries. What is cool to say and what is not? How do we keep our tone? How do we spell out the problem and actively listen? How do we play back what we heard? And what are those next steps? Excuse me while I take a sip. All right. I'm sure all of you have heard of the SBI framework. I live by this. So the the SBI framework to help embrace conflict is what I'm showing each of you today, along with the narratives that I promised. And just for folks who might not be familiar, bear with me, and I'll help you understand what this is. The SBI framework, I came across this probably in 2010 or so only a few years into my career as a professional. We talked about situation, behavior, impact. And really this is a narrative that I use when leading conversations with my own direct reports and coaching new first-time managers, and believe it or not, even experienced managers up to the CEO on how to lead difficult conversations. It's very clean, it's very concise, and it helps. So in situation, this is where you describe your observations in which you are helping to course correct their behavior. In behavior, you describe the behavior you observed or as observed by others. And in impact, you describe the impact the individual's behavior had on you, but not just you, also your team, and also the organization. Remember, behavior is a trickle effect. And sometimes how we behave, we don't realize how deep our negative behavior can go. And you'll see that when we go through the narratives. So once again, the SBI framework, in my eyes, my perspective, is the simplest, most clean, most concise way of delivering conflict or difficult conversations. PJ, I'm going to tap Courtney Peterson here, who is an ex-colleague of mine, to read the narrative. So Courtney, I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but this is a narrative, and I'm just going to take a deep breath and take some water. So Courtney, if you could just lead with the background, and I will move the slides as soon as you say Jyoti, go.
Absolutely. I'm just blowing up the screen because I can't see Jyoti.
And thank you so much, Courtney.
Okay. So intragroup conflict narrative, CEO to senior executive. Background. The senior executive has had many complaints filed against them from individuals across the organization. The complaints primarily stem from employees feeling bullied by this executive. The executive works across teams and always wants his way as the final way of doing things. The executive reports to the CEO, and the CEO is leading a difficult conversation with the executive to help them create more self-awareness. Do you want me to keep reading, Jyoti?
Yeah, just in 1 second. I'm sure all of us have been through this situation before. I've minimized you, so I'm not seeing you, but my hope is through your body language and your facial expressions, you're like, yeah, I've totally been there. I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah. Definitely have. Okay. Situation. Appreciate the opportunity to connect. I want to preface the conversation by stating that I value you as a credible professional and thought partner. This is a high stakes conversation, and because of our partnership, I feel that I can have an honest conversation with you about your recent behavior with staff. Before I go further, I want you to know that what is said today will remain confidential and individual names will not be shared. My goal is to remain objective, and I ask you to give me the opportunity and respect to speak before I ask for your thoughts and answer any questions you may have. With that, I want you to be aware of multiple incidents over the past few months where staff have approached me entailing their dissatisfaction with how they are experiencing you. These interactions have occurred in person, via Zoom, phone, and email, and have all pointed to one common theme: your inability to show up with respect and in a civil manner towards your colleagues. They are specifically pointing at your tone and body language, stating that your tone has been dismissive and disrespectful.
You can start with behavior.
Okay. The following behaviors have been pointed out. Employees cannot predict how you will show up in your interaction with them, meaning your mood dictates how you present yourself in those interactions. You lack the inability to self-regulate your emotions, especially if the situation is not favorable to your best interest. You are known to cut off women and speak over them in meetings. Employees have learned to work around you to ensure that they do not have to deal with your unpredictable behavior. You end or start your emails with, "Make sense?" or "Let's try again," making staff feel that they are not credible professionals. Employees have left one-to-one meetings with you feeling emotionally broken. Instead of lifting employees up, you are perceived as a leader who is rude and disrespectful. That behavior does not speak to our core values. Now, speaking on my own observations, I do feel you lack self-awareness around your opportunity areas and the behavioral impact this has on others. This is a lot to process, and I want to give you the space to react to this. I'd like for you to use the next few moments to pause and reflect.
And this is impact for the same situation.
Okay. What are your thoughts on what we discussed today? Before you respond, I want you to know it takes a lot of courage to truly self-reflect and be honest with yourself. Why do you think what we've discussed today is a concern for the organization? I want you to picture a workplace full of civility. What would that look like?
And then we move to the development plan.
I want to work with you to develop a plan on investing in your future to make you a more effective leader. Meaning, I want to support you in building more positive relationships at work. Thus, after careful consideration and thought, I am going to ask you to be partnered with a civility coach. The goal here is to conduct bi-weekly coaching sessions with an experienced coach to enhance your interactions with staff. Because in order to be the change you want to be, you have to know what you want to change about yourself. This coach will provide you the tools to be more self-aware. Now, I would like to open the door to listen to any suggestions you might have to overcome this challenge. Any ideas shared will not change the fact that you will be paired with a civility coach. However, any mutually agreeable ideas will be taken into consideration to future enhance the development plan.
Thank you, Courtney.
My pleasure.
So I would love for each of you to use the chat capability and tell me what are some things the CEO did to build meaningful connection during this conversation. Showed empathy, wasn't accusatory. Clear boundaries were set. Very good. They were honest and direct. They outlined what to expect in the meeting and were not judgmental. They gave concrete examples without being judgmental. Absolutely. Honest conversation, gave specific and relevant examples. They set expectations. Yes, they were objective. They recognized how hard it would be to take in that feedback. Absolutely. And that was the goal, right? And they closed the circle with the plan. They let the person know they are valued and yet ask for the opportunity to be heard. I love that. They gave space for thoughts from the executive. They encouraged open communication at the end. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to minimize you again. And now that I can talk a little bit better, I'm going to go to our next narrative and then tap Courtney one more time. All right. So this one is an intrapersonal conflict narrative. This is a manager to a direct report. The background: a manager is having a difficult time with their direct report on following through on general management expectations, on hybrid work, right? We've all been dealing with that for the past few years. The manager wants to have a discussion with their direct report on how to reset expectations. The situation is, thanks for joining me today. I'd like to spend some time during our call to reset management expectations. This will not be an easy conversation, and I want to make sure you're okay with that before proceeding. I'll start by saying that you are a valued member of our team, and I'm very pleased by the impact you make to your role and our department. However, I do feel today is the right time to discuss general management expectations regarding our work from home policy. Over the last month, I have observed your request to work from home out of the ordinary. In behavior, I recognize you've hurt your ankle, and I'm so sorry for what you are going through. While I want to be able to support you while you recover, I do think you have managed the request. I do think you could have managed the request with more thoughtfulness. Reflecting on the request, a better approach would have been to request to work from home the first week and inform me you'd like to continue to assess your recovery on a week-to-week basis. One thing I did not say is this, I forgot to read the background. Or sorry, they said they would work from home for 4 weeks straight because they hurt their ankle. So the manager says that it would have been better to have more thought in putting that request in. And they would have liked them to send an email saying, hey, I hurt my ankle. I would appreciate if I could work from home the first week and then reassess the following weeks. Instead of blanket statement, I will work from home. What that would signal to me is that you recognize the situation and are committed to coming into the office if able. Instead of stating 4 weeks from the beginning, I felt that you were not willing to collaborate on options with me. Again, I want you to know I respect your situation, and as an employer, we want to be flexible to your requests. While we aim to provide flexibility to our staff, we are committed to consistent employment practices across all teams. With the coaching lens, the impact. When other team members see you gone for weeks at a time, it causes feelings of disparity. This means I have to manage to why you are allowed to work from home so frequently where they cannot. This is not a management practice I am comfortable with. And I do think there is value in discussing how we can get better aligned on managing our relationship. With that in mind, I'd like to get your thoughts on what we discussed today. And this is continued. What would you do differently if we could do this again? So what the manager's doing is they're pausing and reflecting and allowing the employee to do the same. This helps the manager see if the employee internalized the given feedback. Again, alignment, playing back is very, very important. What do you need from me to ensure there is enhanced clarity on my expectations moving forward? What can the manager do differently to ensure that their communication channels are clear? So the manager's also saying, hey, I can also do a thing or two too. I want us to work. I want this relationship to work. And then what else? I know each of us have heard that question before, but really what that does is it gives an opportunity to the employee to discuss any lingering thoughts. Remaining silent as the facilitator and allowing your conversation partner to think through their response is so critical to ensure that you are building that connection with them. You are not just hashing them and telling things out, but you are building that connection. A simple question like what else is a powerful tool because you're giving the employee platform to provide thoughts on what works for them, and you're not directing what words come into their mouth. So let's chat. What do you think the manager did in this situation to build a meaningful connection during this conversation? Explain how it impacts the team and the organization. Being clear about the impact and what's at stake. You're welcome. Anyone else? Empathized with the employee's condition and how hard things might be. Absolutely. Created open lines of communication, offered support while they recover, reinforcing and apologizing that the injury for her injury and then going into how it's impacting the business. Right. Remaining objective. There's nothing personal here. Providing guidance on a better approach. Absolutely. Showed that they cared about the employee. Right. Empathy is so critical. Compassion. Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, lead with empathy while setting firm expectations. Love it. All right. I have one more narrative. I promise we will not keep continuing to talk. We want to make sure that you have time to answer, or I can answer any questions that you might have. But Courtney, I'm tapping you again so I can take a sip of water for the next narrative.
Okay, I got you. Got my readers.
Thank you.
All right, interpersonal conflict narrative. This is manager to direct report, and background information is as follows. A senior manager is having a difficult time with their direct report on following through on deadlines. These deadlines impact other department deliverables. The senior manager feels that they do not have enough time on their plate to get to all the priorities, and they are not simply compensated enough. They've been vocal about their lack of compensation to staff across the organization. They feel they are the best of the best, and without them, the organization will fail. The manager wants to have a discussion with their direct report on how to demonstrate boundaried vulnerability. Situation. Thank you for joining me today. I know we have had versions of this conversation previously, and I'd like to begin by stating that I am leading with an open mind and willing to listen to your perspective on compensation and your career vision. Before you do that, I want to share some feedback. As general feedback, I am experiencing you as someone laser focused on the urgent need, you, versus what is important, strategy of the organization. The problem with this is it keeps you from managing a collaborative approach to understanding differentiated perspectives. To help you come out of this view, I want you to think about the us perspective versus just you to increase your chances of focusing on solutions. Ultimately, both of us are on the same team, working towards the success of the organization and our teammates. Additionally, I want you to focus on keeping the ball rolling on critical timelines. A few recent examples of that are the hiring process, your inability to honor deadlines, and being communicative on why deadlines are missed.
Now you'll know because some of us, some or maybe all of us here have done recruiting in the past. So I try to pick examples that are relevant, right? Especially when your hiring manager is just not following through. Next one, Courtney.
All right, so the behavior. This behavior is not a good look for the organization, externally and internally. Externally, candidates who have gone through multiple interview rounds are in the holding phase, which impedes their decision-making ability if they have multiple offers. Internally, Your relationships with your recruiter get soured because they have seen these patterns before, and your lag time makes them feel like they dread working with you again, given your next team vacancy. Another opportunity is building relationships across the organization. As you know, business of any kind is just a series of relationships. Our emotions directly affect our success at work. And I get it. Knowing how to talk about our emotions and being professional at work can be a tough balance to strike. As a senior leader, I expect you to demonstrate boundaried vulnerability, meaning share enough about your personal viewpoints where you can create a connection with others, not opening windows of emotional triggers. Prime example of this is when you shared your compensation with employees in a lower band.
If you are a DC employer and you know about the DC transparency new law that came out, this has been happening a lot.
The impact with a coaching lens. How do you believe your statement left staff feeling in lower salary bands? For your benefit, the viewpoint of you sharing was not well received by your colleagues and your peers. Both your peers and I have received several calls about this. Using a future focused lens, I want you to think about where you sit on the sharing spectrum, meaning in areas where you might think others feel you are buttoned up, not sharing what you are working on, versus where you show up leaky, compensation, and challenge yourself to take a step towards building safe connections with others. Finally, I want to understand, what is your biggest insight or aha moment that you are taking away from this conversation today? And what is one next step that resonates most?
PJ, if you could do a polling in just a minute. Let me just go back real quick. The let's chat slide is not up here, but again, if I could get your thoughts on what worked well in this conversation and how this narrative supported meaningful connection building. Thank you so much. Clear expectations were set and thoughtful call to action. Another example, being clear about the impact of undesired behavior. All right. There's another chat. Asking what their takeaways were. Absolutely. Asking for the biggest takeaway and what steps do they think they can take. Asking if they actually understood. Okay. PJ, I'm going to ask for a polling question. Oh, guys, thank you. You don't have to be so nice. You can say no too. Not a problem.
Here, we'll give it about another 30 seconds. All right, I'm actually going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results with everybody, which is wonderful to say that yes, everybody certainly does feel prepared, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Thanks, PJ. All right, look, every conflict conversation is going to look and feel different, right? We all know that. We've been there. But with the right narrative, with the right preparation, with the right framework, you can ensure that you are better prepared to embrace conflict, to really build that meaningful connection. The last thing any one of us want to do as coaches to our staff, as coaches to our executives, as coaches to first-time managers, is to lead with directness, lead without empathy, and lead without a plan. So we want to ensure that we do lead with empathy. We do lead with an objective mindset, and we do lead with a plan. So as I said earlier, start with intent, set your boundaries, right? Talk about what's at stake here. Tell them that you're here to actively listen. Play back what you heard and develop a plan forward. PJ, I'm just going to stop this for a second. And that is all I have for you guys. I am ready and willing to answer your questions. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today, to allow me to have this time with all of you on a Friday during open enrollment season, during performance season, and during everything else going on in our life. I am a certified coach. I do have my own company. So if there's anything I can do to support your professional needs, please let me know. This is my email. My bio had my website on it. I'm super, super proud to take this step forward in my career. And like I said earlier, it took a lot of sweat and tears. So in my vulnerable lens, I'm just so excited. And I promise I don't sound like this on a daily basis. But now I'll open the door for your questions.
Jody, I don't know if you saw the question in the chat stating that these examples are very helpful. However, how do you handle an executive who doesn't think their behavior is an issue and refuses the coaching and has the if employees don't like, they can leave attitude, which I would say is unfortunately probably a very common one we hear from executives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it speaks to the first example of that narrative because that is exactly, I mean, these are lived experiences, folks, right? And these are very common experiences that I shared with you that we deal with on a daily basis, organization to organization. And for the question that was asked, I don't say that coaching in that way is something that is, I'll do it just because I have to do it as a checklist exercise. I would ensure that if an executive is demonstrating such behavior, and I am the HR professional that is coaching their manager or the executive, that I would make it mandatory, right? There are boundaries you cannot cross. There is civility coaches out there to teach you. I have partnered with civility partners who I'm not sure if everybody knows is out in California many times to build self-awareness for these executives. You cannot have the mindset of it's my way or the highway. That is not how it works. You've got to speak to core values. You've got to speak to acceptable behaviors. So to answer that question, if they say that, I would absolutely put them on mandatory training. Maybe they'll leave.
Gloria kind of had a follow-up comment to that she said that's her manager. Her attitude is if you don't like it, you can leave. So I'm hesitant to say anything negative because it's turned around that you're struggling with change.
Gloria, I feel so unfortunate to say that being in HR, I have also been bullied by my manager. And being in HR in your boat, it's so sad when HR professionals cannot act in a civil way, right? We're stuck because folks come to us for advice and guidance on how to manage that. Who do we go to, right? Yep. Oh, I see Gloria now. Thank you, Gloria. I'm now put the pictures back up. I was so nervous to look at your faces while I was talking, but here I am. So what I would certainly ask of you to self-reflect and see if this is the right fit for you. Because your mental health takes priority above all. If there is a way where you can provide anonymous feedback to your CEO or the individual above, the pseudo boss, then I would ask that you do that. But if there is not, then I would ask for you to self-reflect and see if this is the right fit. Because unfortunately, what we experience at work, we bring to our home. And I've been there, and I don't ever want anyone being in that situation again. So I apologize that you're in that situation. I empathize with you. And you and I can certainly have a conversation offline.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've actually asked for a supervisor change. I'm hoping that that might take effect in the new year.
I appreciate it. Yeah, please keep me posted. Now I'm going to be thinking about you all weekend. And PJ, I'm not opening chats. I'm
Yeah,
guessing
no.
you're going to tell me. Okay.
Yes, and I will say that as Jody says, and we talk about it at the roundtable all the time, HR deserves exactly the same considerations and thoughtfulness, and should be have the same respect as everybody else that we fight to ensure has on a day-to-day basis. And just because we're HR doesn't mean that we don't deserve exactly the same. So as Jody said, please do make sure that you're putting yourself in that position, because your mental health, as she said, is more important than anything. Next was we're 100% remote. We have an employee who's getting quote sick very frequently and will abruptly send a message, "I'm not feeling well, I'm logging off now," without giving her manager a chance to respond. I know she doesn't need to ask for permission, but this is becoming a pattern. The manager wants to be empathetic and understanding to medical concerns, but this employee does not share the reason, or the very few times she states, "I didn't sleep much last night. My head hurts." How do you advise to coach her on this? To please communicate early, for example, that morning, instead of all of a sudden sending a team message to a group saying, "I'm not feeling well, logging off now," without her manager knowing if she left work pending, et cetera, of her work.
Absolutely. Again, a very, very relevant question that happens a lot. I would certainly take a look at the handbook and ensure that there are policies in place. If there are sick leave policies, there are some abusers, I will say that try to abuse that policy a lot. But I think in this situation, I'm not sure who asked the question, the SBI framework is perfect. Because what you need to do is you need to have one of those honest conversations about the observations you have had and what their peers probably have, right? And then discuss how that behavior is impacting the team and what that impact of the team then affects the organization, right? Each of our collective efforts support the organization. And when time and time again, we are not showing up for what we are supposed to do, that employee needs to understand that there are going to be repercussions. Because I say, and this is just my observation, once or twice is fine. After 2 times, it becomes a pattern. And that's when that conversation needs to take place. And I would encourage whoever asked this question to have that on a timely basis. Because it seems to me, from my own understanding of the situation, that it's been going on for a bit. And that's just unacceptable. So again, look at your handbook, look at what acceptable behaviors are. Ensure you're having that conversation. Create a narrative. You can certainly take my narrative. I believe it was the second narrative, and edit as you feel appropriate. But you do need to understand, you need to explain to them it's a trickle effect.
Absolutely. Next question was, do you suggest we follow up with an email summarizing this conversation or the SBI, or somehow incorporate it into the annual performance review?
Is it the same?
Different individual, different question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Certainly. Do you suggest we follow up with an email summarizing the conversation or the SBI, or somehow incorporate it into the annual performance review?
Well, I would definitely follow up with an email first. I don't think you want anyone to ever feel shell-shocked about even though you've had that conversation, you could have that conversation in January and the first mid-year review happens in July. right? And they've probably forgotten about it. Maybe they haven't, but it's been so long that they've heard about this stuff. You need to follow up through an email because again, documentation is critical. And don't just think about documentation from a mid-year review or a year-end review process. And some people have quarterly reviews. I'm not sure what your organization practice is. But the best way to do this is a best practice I've managed through the years, is an instant playback. Whether you do it that night or the next morning, do not drag it out. Write a playback summary. And you can start with, as discussed. We went through this today, and it does not need to be detailed. You can do 4 or 5 bullets of what you discussed, but extract from that conversation the highlights of what you need to play back. I hope that helps.
That is all we have regarding questions. And as I had said in the chat, we will definitely be sharing the slides so that you'll have these really great summaries and talking points of how and what you need to do and the questions you should ask. Because I think your situations, Jody, were great. I think we've all run into those in one form or another. And I think it was just so helpful to be able to have that information and just a guide that you can then adapt to every situation. So certainly can't thank you enough for all of this information and just for the thoughtful answers and the way to look at this. It's hard. I think a lot of times, it gets put on HR's shoulders of, okay, now fix it. And how do you best go about doing that? And this framework has been great, I think, to help us do that.
Thank you, PJ. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I saw a couple typos and I'm pretty anal about that kind of stuff. So before I send it out, I'm blaming my health, but nothing else. I'm going to send it out to you guys later today. PJ, you'll give me a list of who attended?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much for your time. I'm giving you 5 minutes back on a Friday. Again, very appreciative.
Thank you all again so much for joining us for the Embracing Conflict to Create Meaningful Connections. Jody, you were fantastic. We appreciate you joining the HR Roundtable and hope that all of you have a fantastic rest of your day. Make sure to take care of yourselves and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.